Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're delving into unlocking trust and navigating customer identity in the AI era. And this is based on our 2025 Customer Identity Trends Report. My name is Gareth Davies. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Auth0, and I'm excited to be sharing some of the biggest takeaways with you today. This year, we'll be delving deep into how AI is creating new challenges and also opportunities for that trust. So here's our plan for today. We'll spend a good portion of the time on how to prepare for the AI era, what this means for identity and trust. We'll touch on navigating threats and understanding your customers, and then we'll set strategies for earning user trust. So as a quick primer here, for those of you unfamiliar with the Customer Identity Trends Report, this is a brand new deep research study here at Okta that we've used to dig into key customer trends around AI and beyond. And the findings here are built on an anonymized global survey of close to 7,000 consumers across 9 countries. So this gives us really rich insights into their attitudes and experiences. The research itself was conducted back in February of 2025. And then we use a tremendous amount of data and telemetry from the Auth0 platform itself to make sure that we're leveraging the billions of real-world login events every month to help guide our insights. So let's get into it. Before we delve into the actual data itself, I wanted to run through some high-level takeaways. First, there's a clear need to focus on security and safely introduce AI agents to your consumers and customers. This means prioritizing security from the absolute start of AI development, being transparent with users about how your AI is built with their security in mind, and also importantly, not to overlook the continuing value of human agents. Second, there's a big need to craft trustworthy and convenient experiences. So this involves adopting modern authentication, so think passkeys and biometrics, for security that's both stronger and more seamless, as well as transparency in data collection. And then thirdly, defending against common identity threats continues to be top of mind for consumers, which means moving past older, more vulnerable authentication methods and requiring phishing-resistant options to make your systems a harder target. So let's talk about our favorite current topic, which is AI. It's not just coming, it is here, and it's a game changer for identity and trust. And let's just take a second. Let's think back to 2022. ChatGPT was a watershed moment. And if we look at the chart here, AI is indeed scaling faster than ever. The headline says it all. 37% of customers are already using Gen AI. So a significant portion of your user base is already interacting with these advanced systems. And as you can see from the timeline, the pace of development is just incredible. We saw ChatGPT hit over 100 million monthly users faster than any technology in history. And this rapid adoption is really transforming customer expectations as well. End users are looking for experiences that aren't just intelligent, they're also secure, they're seamless, and they're human-centered when it comes to their identity. And as AI scales, so do these expectations. Customers want secure, seamless, and human-centered identity experiences. So it's really now the time to prepare for this spike and making sure that you're taking full advantage of what Gen AI has to offer, whilst also mitigating risk. So let's just talk even what are these Gen AI agents? Agents are executing actions on behalf of users and organizations. They're autonomous, they're goal-seeking, and they often operate beyond just basic simple if-then logic. And critically, they need access to multiple systems to fulfill their roles, which makes their identity and access controls absolutely fundamental. And as we saw, at least 37% of your customers are already encountering them frequently. And we're seeing that companies that find AI agents attractive are using them for always available and infinitely scalable use cases. So think about customer experience that's evolving whilst reducing the cost to actually serve a customer. But to do this, AI agents require sensitive, often valuable and confidential information from within an organization and from the user themselves, as well as, of course, ensuring that they're building on user trust. But despite the rapid rise of AI, we're seeing there is still a trust barrier. over 70% of user surveys said that they still prefer humans over AI. So there's a 4.4 to 1 preference for humans. And this isn't isolated to just one group within the study. The preference for humans we saw across every single cohort themselves. So this preference does vary, though, as you can see here from the chart. So on the behavior side, tech avoiders are 16 times more likely to prefer humans than tech innovators, who are roughly parity in their preference between AI and humans. And then within the baby boomer cohort, we saw a very strong preference for humans here, about 18 times more, for example, than Gen Z, who are much more open to AI, but are still themselves leaning towards humans. And then we're also seeing a country-based distribution here as well. So for example, in Canada, users are about 8 times more likely to prefer humans than in India, where the preference is much closer to even. So it does go to show that there really is a significant distribution across cohorts and across geos here. And then when we look at which tasks users are actually comfortable delegating to AI, we're seeing a very clear pattern emerge. So they're seeing AI as more of a taskmaster, not necessarily a decision maker. So users are still broadly hesitant. Even the leading task they use AI for, which was language translation, was only selected by 38% of responders. And notably, 23% of all responders said they would not use AI agents for any of the tasks we listed here. So what we're seeing is they're much more likely to use AI for more tedious tasks, language translation, research, writing assistance, and less likely for the subjective and personal tasks like creatives tasks, personal shopping recommendation, managing calendars, or decision-making support, at least today. So whilst we've seen that users are cautious about what tasks they'll actually give to the AI, the hesitancy we saw starts to go a bit deeper for a significant portion of your customers. So in fact, nearly 1 in 4 are ghosting AI, with trust being the primary reason here. And so let's dig into a bit about the trust gap. First and foremost, it's about personal data. So 44% of those users who said they wouldn't use AI or are just generally distrustful about AI responded by saying that they simply don't trust AI agents with their personal data, which of course is a huge hurdle, and it's directly related to data security and data privacy. And second, whilst there are concerns here, there's also concerns about reliability. 35% of respondents expressed doubts about whether AI agents will perform accurately or consistently. And so they're worried that there may be a hallucination, it may not work as expected, or the AI itself may just make a mistake. So it's worth calling out, these really aren't minor concerns, they're fundamental roadblocks to AI adoption and engagement. And it shows that even the most AI advanced capabilities will fall flat if users don't have confidence in the security, the handling of data, and the basic underlying reliability. And it's really not too surprising when we consider around what we know broader expectations customers have for digital interactions more broadly. So let's look a little bit here now at the demand when it comes to security and user experience overall, and we can use that to set the stage for how we're approaching any new technology, how customers are thinking about it, including AI. So we've seen just now how cautious users are about sharing their data. I think what's critical here is that trust and security we're seeing are outweighing product value across the board. So when deciding, for example, to create an account, more users are considering a company's reputation and their trustworthiness, about 74%. And then security measures as well, 72%, we're seeing as important factors that drive the overall quality or the value of a given product or service. So that means that if basic trust in your handling of security isn't there, introducing AI is going to increase and add additional headwinds. Furthermore, 64% of users are concerned or very concerned about identity fraud. And really, this is universal across all demographic cohorts. So we're seeing that users are naturally wary about how AI agents are using and accessing their personal information, and connecting that to the concern about fraud risk. There's also a concern about friction, and having to fill out long sign up or login forms is already today a significant friction among 62% of respondents. Nearly a quarter of users report always or often abandoning online purchases due to issues with sign up or login processes. So, building on this, if AI interactions are perceived as complex or frustrating, or they just add more friction, we know that user adoption will suffer. And since much of the promise of AI is actually to reduce friction, having poorly designed AI can make it worse. And then finally, we have the password paradox, right? So this is the correlation between perceived convenience and risky behaviors. Whilst passwords are rated as the most convenient authentication method by 73% of users, 68% admitted to actually reusing passwords across multiple accounts. And this is often because, frankly, passwords are just too hard to remember, right? That was the response from 53% of our surveyed respondents. Users are seeking convenience. And so if AI-based authentication is cumbersome, there's a very real reason or likelihood that they may resist. And if AI relies, of course, on weak existing password practices, then we're really compounding those inherent security risks. So it's clear, customers want security that feels incredibly easy. These are foundational demands that align with security, and having low friction is really important here. And then ensuring that we're actually asking for consumer trust and sensitively managing their data really plays an important role in how secure end users feel. So if trust is often a missing component here, then the logical question is, how do we install it? Human oversight here really is important. 38% of respondents said that human oversight to review or approve AI decisions would increase their trust. And as we can see here, this was the most frequent choice for increasing trust across 14 of the 18 demographic groups that we examined. Next, transparency and ethics followed very closely. So 34% cited transparency, which is really how AI makes decisions and the data it uses, as a means of growing trust. And this is followed by the AI adhering to ethical guidelines and having accountability measures. This was particularly noticeable within the Gen Z cohort. 30% of Gen Z customers specifically showed support for AI agents that follow ethical guidelines to ensure that fairness, privacy, and security was built in, as well as other factors around trust that include accountability for mistakes, personalized user controls, and even third-party certifications or reviews. So we've talked about the critical elements for building user trust in AI, things like human oversight and transparency. But I think it's fair to say, even with the best of intentions, if the underlying identity and security armor of your AI is missing, or if it's weak, then you're opening the door to significant risks. And what happens when AI operates without that identity armor? Well, it exposes your business in some pretty critical ways. And so a few things we're seeing can start to go wrong. The first is unauthorized data access. This is a major one. AI agents could potentially fetch data that users or even the AI agent itself should never see. Then there are the stale and over provisioned permissions. Think old roles or tokens that grant AI agents power that nobody's tracking anymore. These create hidden vulnerabilities and obviously need to be mitigated. We have secrets and credential leakage. That's another huge concern. If API keys or tokens end up in prompts or in logs, attackers could obviously grab those and then gain access. And then we face weak or coarse-grained authorization concerns. If your access rules are too broad, any agent may be able to run highly sensitive actions that it shouldn't. All of this leads to serious privacy and data leak exposure, where personal data leaves your secure zones and ultimately could end up in the wrong hands. And finally, all of this can result in major compliance and audit gaps, especially if AI actions aren't properly tied back to a real user or to log consent, which makes audits an absolute nightmare. So how do we build security from the start? Really, it requires applying a robust set of identity principles to these new and evolving AI interaction patterns. So here are some key points and areas. Authentication. So this means implementing strong yet seamless authentication to reliably confirm user identity before AI accesses data or makes critical decisions. Next is calling APIs. This really demands robust identity controls for how AI agents interact with your APIs. Securely vault, manage, and rotate those AI access tokens. Don't hard code them. That's really key. Don't hard code. Then we have asynchronous user confirmation. So for AI tasks, think AI tasks that run asynchronously over time. Enabling just-in-time authentication and authorization here is key, as well as re-verifying user intent and permissions for delayed actions. And then avoiding leaving sessions continuously open is really important here. And then finally, on the authorization side, enforcing principles of least privilege, granting AI agents only the minimum necessary permissions for their tasks is really important, as well as using fine-grained authorization and then dynamically updating these positions based on business rules, compliance, and risk will all set the stage for a much more secure foundation from day one. So we've spent a decent amount of time now on the specifics of AI, the opportunities, user perceptions, and then critically how to build trust and security directly into AI agents from day one. But I will say it's important to remember that these systems don't operate or exist in a vacuum. They operate within a broader digital ecosystem that itself is unfortunately already teeming with persistent identity threats. So understanding this general threat landscape is really critical, because any vulnerability in your overall customer identity security can undermine even the best AI-specific safeguards. And in fact, compromised identities could become a gateway to misuse within AI, or AI itself could become a new target or tool and an additional attack vector. So let's zoom out a bit, look at some of the most significant threats against customer identity, and then we'll refine that context to understand why robust modern identity security is really a non-negotiable in today's environment, especially as we integrate with more sophisticated technologies like AI. So let's zoom in. With digital identities are now central to accessing countless apps and services, shaping much of our daily lives, and their role is really only growing. But wherever there's value, there's also threat. Cyber criminals see login systems as prime targets, which is supported by a growing black market of tools and services. We're seeing attacks rise across all industries, requiring increasingly advanced defenses across the board. And that's really why strong authentication, authorization, and customer identity and access management are crucial to maintaining trust, security, and privacy. And one of the most persistent challenges in securing authentication, it begins really at the front door, which is fake signups. So when it comes to fake signups, attackers, they really don't take a day off, and the scale that we see really is really quite alarming. The easiest way for a malicious actor to access the privileges, services, and information behind the login box, it's just to create a puppet account, under their control, which they manage from day one. And then when performed at scale, these fake sign-up, they can create significant problems and lead to unnecessary expenses. For example, fake users may act as a foothold to be used later as aged accounts, to bypass controls, or to enumerate and discover existing user accounts. They can be used to consume rewards like sign-up bonuses, or to execute denial of service attacks by consuming resources and exceeding rate limits. And then even entire conversion flows, as they're being optimized based on how users interact with the service. You can imagine how fraudulent registrations really just pollute all this rich customer data, making analysis incredibly complex, and often leading to expensive and timely cleanup projects. And what we're seeing also is that these fraudulent attempts, they're not evenly distributed. Certain industries are certainly more impacted than others, as we can see here on the retail and e-commerce example, given the scale of impact there. So how can we fight back against this onslaught of fake registration? There's a few here, a few layers to consider. First, we can look at the host layer defense against brute force attacks. These are often provided by your hosting or CDN provider, things like DDoS attacks and mitigation to keep your service available. Bot management to filter out any obvious automated traffic is obviously a great first step. And then rate limiting to control the speed of requests. Next, there's platform layer defenses within your SIAM system itself. So this is where you employ bot detection that analyzes user behavior. You can enable or increase capture requirements, especially when you detect an attack campaign itself. You can tighten your brute force and suspicious IP throttling thresholds, for example, and actively block abusive IPs. And then finally, look at sign-up attack-specific defenses. So leveraging passkeys is obviously a powerful defense. They're incredibly hard to abuse in sign-up attacks, as well as using pre-sign-up rules or actions, like enforcing a challenge or requiring more information if the risk is perceived to be high. And then finally, using identity proofing for high-risk sign-ups. So as you can see, the key here is really a multi-layered approach to help significantly reduce fraudulent registration. But securing new registrations is just one battle. Protecting the accounts you already have is another ongoing challenge, which moves into the realm of account takeovers. So let's shift our attention now to protecting existing accounts, since the battle against account takeover is truly relentless. So whilst fraudulent registrations are, I suppose, at a minimum, an expensive nuisance, account takeovers pose a much greater threat to overall security and privacy. In a B2C context, attackers may get access to resources like loyalty points, to privileges, so the ability to make a purchase, for example, especially when products are in limited supply, as well as valuable demographic and personally identifiable information. In the B2B context, an attacker who successfully compromises a user account may then use it to access highly sensitive data, which could result in a breach with significant regulatory and contractual penalties for the targeted organization. So while some ATO attempts target individuals, most employ brute force login attack techniques against password-based authentication to compromise as many accounts as possible. And to understand how to defend against these, it helps to see how attackers typically operate, often exploiting common user behaviors. So this diagram here illustrates a common credential stuffing attack path. It's a primary method for ATOs. So you'll see brute force login attacks. They most notably, in this case, we're looking at credential stuffing, password spraying, and password guessing. They take advantage of poor password habits and policies that we talked about earlier, including password reuse. So if you recall, 68% of users reported using passwords across multiple accounts. We also see minor modifications. So this is when a user creates a unique password for each account by simply modifying a small set of variables, like a number at the end of the password itself. We're also seeing issues around short passwords, which can obviously decrease the level of effort required for an attacker to guess it, along with things like long-lived passwords. So when we combine password reuse with the long duration, that can increase the susceptibility to compromise. So in summary, passwords really are a vulnerability here, a pretty major one. But even when we add more factors, attackers are still finding ways to challenge them, which is leading to MFA abuse. So let's talk about strengthening MFA. What are the best strategies to defend against MFA abuse? We've seen that even MFA itself isn't a silver bullet. Attackers are actively working to abuse it, but just over 7% of MFA events on our platform show malicious signs. And we're seeing specific verticals like media and entertainment, for example, get hit particularly hard. But the good news is there are clear strategies to manage MFA and make it much more resilient. It's really about smart implementation and strong factors. So first, focusing on implementing your authentication properly. Gaps or workarounds like allowing administrators to bypass MFA will absolutely be exploited. And second, using strong secondary factors is really critical here, moving away from easily interceptable methods, as well as prioritizing authenticators based on possession or biometrics. So think authenticator apps or even better device biometrics tied to WebAuthn, like fingerprint or facial scans. They're much harder here for attackers to bypass. And then third, leveraging adaptive MFA. This is a smart approach. So this is about assessing risk at each login and then only prompting for additional verification when necessary, which ultimately reduces friction for legitimate users whilst increasing security against the suspicious attempts. And then finally, embracing new MFA methods that are both secure and convenient. So WebAuthn enabled device biometrics, so think Apple Face ID or Touch ID or Windows Hello. These are all great examples. They provide top-notch security because threat actors find WebAuthn very difficult to crack, and users, of course, find them highly convenient. By focusing on these strategies, you can significantly reduce the risk of MFA abuse. And it's not just about the robust technology, but it's also understanding here actual end users and how they want to interact with them to help optimize that security posture and deliver delight. So let's talk about what your customers really think about identity, trust, and friction, and how they ultimately make decisions about their own digital identity. So I'm sure this is no surprise for anyone here. In our hyper-connected digital world, customer expectations have absolutely soared. Customers expect every brand they interact with to deliver a delightful, seamless, personalized experience across every channel, device, and touch point, whether they're shopping online, using an app, or walking into a physical store. They want to be recognized, understood, and then served without any friction. So that really focuses us on three things here. One is instant gratification. So think about removing friction through seamless authentication and checkout flows. So back to AI, this is where AI can help to detect fraud in real time to help keep things safe, but also fast. On the omni-channel experience side, this is about making sure customers stay authenticated and recognized whether they're on mobile, desktop, or in store. And identity ensures continuity here, while AI adds context and also intent. And then personalization, tailoring experiences based on unified identity data. So whilst AI enriches that with real-time behavioral signals without compromising sensitive information, we've got to recognize the kicker here is it all has to be underlined and underpinned by security. So there really is a true consumer expectation for instant, personalized, and omni-channel experiences. They have to be delightful and frictionless, but also trusted right from the very start. And keep in mind that 85% of consumers wish that companies actually earn their trust when it comes to handling their data. So I think this just really underlines the fact that tailored and seamless experiences also have to be safe experiences. And when a user signs up for your service, your app, that decision-making process is heavily predicated on trust and how they perceive the security and trust of your app. So let's just recognize that when a user does sign up, they're signaling intent to start or to continue a relationship with your business. It's also triggering the creation of an authoritative customer identity that you now have. And it's potentially unlocking valuable zero and first-party data, both of which are becoming important alternative as third-party cookies disappear and increasingly first-party data is essential for any modern customer-centric organization. And all of this means that marketers, product owners, and UX designers have the opportunity, but also the responsibility to orchestrate campaigns that nudge users towards creating an account, and to do that while demonstrating value and keeping privacy and security front of mind. And let's recognize that identity fraud is still a major concern for consumers. 32% of users are very concerned about identity fraud. And today we think about identity fraud, which is really the unauthorized use of another person's information. It's often the precursor to identity theft, which then leads to the unauthorized acquisition of an individual's identity, which is becoming more and more common. Both are partly enabled by lax security and privacy controls that can result in data breaches, which ultimately make it easy for criminals to impersonate users. So given that level of concern, 67% of Americans surveyed indicate that they're very concerned about identity fraud, and 73% of all baby boomers are concerned or very concerned. So really this is top of mind across all cohorts and across multiple geos. But it's worth flagging that when it comes to data security, not all organizations are viewed equally by consumers. Consumers' level of trust in a company drives revenue-generating behaviors. It's including the likelihood here to purchase again, the preference of a certain brand over a competitor, and a willingness to share personal data. This is based on Forrester's 2023 Consumer Trust Imperative Survey. Customer trust varies enormously by institution type. So at the top end, 63% of respondents trust banks and financial institutions with their personal data, but only 29% could say the same about social media platforms and nonprofit organizations. So when embracing technology, it's really critical here to place trust in institutions. Tech innovators we found are particularly trusting, 18% points higher across all institutions. And banks and FIs, financial institutions, have a pretty enviable position. So while trust in certain institutions may be high, any friction, it's just worth calling out that the user experiences can quickly erode goodwill and ultimately impact conversion. Which brings us all to a critical question for anyone here focused on growth, which is how much does sign-up friction really matter for your customers? Is it a deal breaker for customers? The answer overwhelmingly is yes. Sign-up and login friction truly are the enemies of conversion. Nearly a quarter of respondents either always or often are abandoning online purchases due to issues with sign-up or login processes. And 40% report sometimes doing so, which ultimately means this is a pretty universal problem. We found that Gen Z and millennials are especially intolerant of sign-up and login friction. So the younger the cohort, the higher the impact. Among Gen Z respondents, 11% always abandon an online purchase when faced with sign-up or login friction, and 26%, often do so. And then the least tolerant were the tech innovators. A whopping 43% of tech innovators are either always or often abandoning an online purchase when faced with a sign-up or login friction. That was the most of anyone in the study here. So clearly, this group knows what great experience looks like, and they expect their brands and the companies they interact with to deliver it. So given this intolerance for friction, let's talk a little bit about here what users actually want when it comes into logging in conveniently and securely. So when we look at login habits, it's clear that convenience and familiarity play a massive role. The stick to what you know paradigm really seems to be true. There's a very clear and strong link between how often people use an authentication method and how convenient they think it actually is. The correlation coefficient here was 0.92 out of 1, indicating a very close relationship between the two. We think very likely that the correlation is bidirectional. So that is to say, using a method more frequently makes it feel more familiar. And then the greater familiarity here influences opinions regarding convenience. So basically methods are perceived as more convenient when they're used more frequently. And then this preference for convenience, especially with familiar methods like passwords that we talked about, inherently leads to some more risky behaviors. So despite all the warnings, the familiar method, the password, is still widely misused. Reusing them is still incredibly common. And as attackers have become adept at brute forcing weak passwords, and the widespread password reuse, it's led to increasing complexity requirements around passwords. So think increasing length in passwords, special characters, numbers, combination of upper and lower case, which at the same time is highlighting the need for alternatives that are both secure and user-friendly, which brings us to methods that are actually fan favorites here. So let's talk about biometrics. So in contrast to issues with passwords, when we look at what users perceive as most secure and also most convenient, we're finding that biometrics are consistently rising to the top. And to be effective in customer applications, and especially with everyday consumers, authentication techniques must balance this delicate balance of security and usability. And while legacy authentication techniques often imposed a trade-off, these more modern approaches combine phishing-resistant security with the convenience of a fingerprint or a facial scan, which is really just a tap of a button or authenticator app today. We're seeing, as you can see here, the biometric usage is off the charts. So across every generation, fingerprint is the most chosen, followed by Face ID. And we're seeing expectations really only amongst tech avoiders who are having concerns around trust in passwords and phone number verification. Then on the social login front, it's perceived as comparatively insecure relative to biometrics. Only 35% of respondents regard social logins as being very secure or secure, which is a worrying sign for marketers trying to nudge users in this direction due to the demographic data that it can often provide. And then third, perceptions vary widely based on a user's attitude to new technology is something we saw, which is clearly illustrated here in the chart. Tech innovators and early adopters are much more likely to regard a particular authentication method as being very secure or secure than the mainstream adopters, tech traditionalists, and the tech avoiders. So considering all these factors, high expectations, security fears, friction intolerance, and specific authentication preferences, what is it really that customers want from their digital experiences? And we're seeing three things. Customers want frictionless, personalized, and instantaneous experiences when logging into apps and to making purchases. At the same time, they want control over what data they share with whom, and they want appropriate security controls in place to be able to protect that data. I think complicated matters even more for brands. A range of factors here, including country of residency, the age, generation, and attitude towards new technology, as we've seen here. All of this influences preferences and imposes specific requirements. So what we're seeing is that instead of a singular approach to customer identity, organizations really should employ a combination of techniques to meet the personalization, privacy, and security needs of digital consumers. So trust is key in this digital world in 2025. Here's how you can earn trust with a secure, customer-centric identity foundation. So to get the experience right, it means you have to get customer identity right. You have to make it easy for customers to access what they want, when they want it, from any device that they're closest to, from wherever they are in the world. And not only that, that means anticipating what customers want or need through personalization. And of course, you have to do all of this whilst keeping their data secure and keeping up with the compliance goals. Customer identity is really is the key here to getting it right. But it's not just as easy as slapping a login box on the homepage. So as we wrap up some of our strategic discussion, I want to leave you with this key thought. To get the experience right, you have to get customer identity right. Whether it's web, mobile, chat, or increasingly AI-driven interactions, a strong customer identity foundation is what enables everything else to everything else. Whether that's truly personalized experiences, robust security and fraud prevention, respectful consent and privacy management, and then of course the continuity that builds customer loyalty across all your channels and systems. So given the importance of customer identity for crafting these experiences for your customers, let's lay out a three-pillar strategy for success. First, safely introduce AI agents. This means prioritizing security from the absolute start of your AI development. Be transparent with users about how your AI is built, with their security in mind. And importantly, don't overlook the continuing value of human agents. Second, craft trustworthy and convenient experiences. This means adopting modern authentication, think passkeys, biometrics, for security that's both stronger and more seamless. Also, transparency and data collection here really is key. And then thirdly, defend against common identity threats. This means moving past older, vulnerable authentication methods and requiring phishing-resistant options to make your systems a harder target. And with that, I'd like to thank you for making it all the way through. You can view the full report here, and looking forward to engaging with you at future Auth0 webinars and events. Thank you so much.